Hey YouTube, this is PrimetimePokemon. In this video, I'll be summarizing this past weekend's Latin American International Championships. This was a major international tournament that took place in Brazil, November 16th through the 18th. 630 Masters players participated in the event. And it is important to note that this was the first time that Lost Thunder was legal in the standard format. So the remainder of this video, I'll be looking at the results of the tournament, showing some of the deck checklists for some of the better decks in the tournament, and then providing some analysis on some of my favorite decks that were winners in this particular tournament. Going into the weekend, I was very interested in seeing how some of the Lost Thunder cards performed, in particular Blacephalon GX, the Lost March archetype, Zoroark GX, and Granbull. So before I get into showing the actual tournament results from the Latin American International Championships, I'm on a website, limitlesstcg.com, that I find very useful for analyzing tournaments. They have some statistics on there for most successful decks, and the deck that did win this tournament would be a Zoroark Control deck. But as you can see, Zoroark GX was the most successful type of deck out there. And if you hover over this 31, you can see the different variations of Zoroark GX that were used. Granbull was the second most successful deck, and that is a very good deck coming from Lost Thunder. A deck that I was looking forward to, Blacephalon, was the fourth most successful deck. Vikavolt Rayquaza is still popular down here, and then the deck that I was really looking forward to would be the Lost March archetype deck, which I've had success with. The highest result for Lost March was 61st place. So let's head on over to the tournament results now and analyze those. Here is a look at the tournament results this past weekend. And the winning deck would be a Zoroark Control deck. Several different players used the same deck. The winner was from the United States here. Scrolling down a little bit farther, you can see that Granbull placed second. And then lots of Zoroark GX variations. Zoroark Decidueye GX and several different decks out there did utilize the Alolan Ninetales from Lost Thunder, the Fairy type one, for its ability. Here is the Blacephalon GX Naganadel deck that I was talking about, 7th place overall. Here's another Granbull deck that placed 8th. Rayquaza Vikavolt placed 9th. And then the farther that you go down, the more Zoroark GX decks that you see. Here is a Gardevoir Swampert, Alolan Ninetales deck. I may have to profile this deck in the future. It is a good one. I can scroll down a little bit more here, just go to the top 64 and then jump into the deck checklist for some of the winning decks. I believe the first place deck did receive $10,000. So it is a worthwhile trip if you win or even make the top 10. So here are some more Blacephalon GX decks down here. Malamar Necrozma GX, still somewhat relevant. There's a look at the top 64, and now we can go into more specific deck checklists, and then I'll show the strategy on the online TCG. So now I'll jump into analyzing the deck checklist and providing the general strategy for the deck. We'll take a look at the first place deck first, a Zoroark Control deck. Several players use this same deck. So first up would be the deck checklist, 37 total trainer cards, only 5 energy. So essentially this is a stall type of deck. You're not looking to attack very often. But several players, as you can see at the bottom here, used this deck. So now I'll jump on over to the online TCG and show the general strategy. And I do hope to profile all of the decks I'll be talking about in this video in the next couple of weeks on my channel. The strategy with this deck, as the name implies, would be to control what your opponent does. The general Pokemon that you want to get set up would be Zoroark GX and Magcargo. You can get up to 4 Zoroark GX set up and then use its trade ability to get the exact cards you want into your hand. The way that you do that is you set up Magcargo, smooth over, put the card that you want into your hand on the top of your deck, and then use trade to get that card into your hand. As far as the other Pokemon go, Ditto Prism Star is very useful. There's not an Alolan Grimer in the deck. Oranguru helps with resource management, allowing you to put 3 additional cards from your discard pile back into your deck. So the one-off cards that you have in the deck, you can use more than once. Sableye can limit what your opponent does, allowing them not to play any supporter cards from their hand the next turn. And then Alolan Muck shuts down all basic Pokemon's abilities, which is huge. And this deck is based on a lot of Stage 1 Pokemon's abilities, so you can still have Alolan Muck in play and use abilities. Oranguru would be a popular ability out there, Sun and Moon base set, and then Wonder Tag, of course, on Tapu Lele GX. Articuno GX is a card that has been popping up recently in some competitive decks. This card is used only for its Cold Crush GX attack. Discard all energy from both active players. So if you're not able to discard energy with some of the trainer cards, you can limit what your opponent can do by using Cold Crush GX. 37 total trainer cards, so lots of options with trainer cards. There's ways to switch your opponent's active Pokemon, whether it be with Counter Catcher or Guzma. Lots of ways to discard energy with Crushing Hammer and Enhanced Hammer. Lots of ways to retreat, switch, get the evolution Pokemon that you need with Timer Ball and Ultra Ball. Lysander Labs is very interesting. It turns off the effects of Pokemon Tool cards. And then Ace Roll, of course, is very useful to heal damage. Same thing goes for Max Potion. Pal Pad here is another way to get supporter cards back into your deck. Gladion is useful in case you prize one of the cards you only have one of in the deck. And then Plumeria is actually very useful, allowing you to discard an energy from your opponent's Pokemon. So the general strategy with this deck is to not really attack at all. All you want to do is make your opponent either scoop and you win the game, or make your opponent run out of cards. Essentially, there are so many ways with this deck to remove energy and put Pokemon into the active Pokemon spot that are not set up, that every single turn your opponent may not be able to do anything at all. Personally, this is a deck I'm not a huge fan of. I am more of an offensive type of deck builder. I like to do powerful attacks every single turn. But as you can see with this deck and the popularity of Zoroark GX decks in this tournament, I think this Zoroark Control deck is here to stay. The next deck that I'll be looking at would be the second place deck, a Granbull deck. So first I'll take a look at the deck checklist and then provide the general strategy for the deck. Like the first place deck, there were several players that used this exact deck checklist for battle. So 17 different Pokemon, 37 trainer cards again, so lots of trainer cards, and only 6 Fairy Energy. Just the general strategy overall with this deck is to make sure that you have 0 cards in your hand before you attack with Granbull. That way you can do 160 damage per turn. So I'll head on over to the online TCG and show the deck checklist. Here's a look at the Granbull deck on the online TCG. Now this deck is very similar to the Zoroark Control deck in that it is a very complicated deck to play. You have to be able to think several turns ahead to be able to do exactly what you want each and every turn. General strategy here is to use Granbull as the primary attacker, having 0 cards in your hand. That way, all out can do 160 damage each and every turn, 190 damage with a choice band. The other Pokemon in this deck are merely for getting the cards you want into your hand. 2 copies of Oranguru. Instruct here allows you to draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. Mag Cargo allows you to smooth over the ability on the card, putting the card you want to get into your hand on the top of your deck. And then Zebstrika, this card has an ability that allows you to just discard your hand and draw 4 new cards. So essentially, Granbull is the only attacker in the deck. All the other Pokemon are in the deck just to get your hand set up. As you'll notice with the trainer cards, 37 total, which is a ton. Lots of item cards, which are easier to discard from your hand. Apricorn Maker, 4 copies of this card. It is a good way to get your hand down to 0 if it's going to get something like an Ultra Ball or a Nest Ball, for example. So a complicated deck overall. Like I mentioned, you definitely need your thinking cap on when battling with this deck. Choice Band, very important here to increase the amount of damage that Granbull can do. Of course, Rayquaza GX is weak to Fairy type Pokemon. Diantha is very useful to allow you to get more cards from your discard pile into your hand. So similarly to what we saw with the Zoroark Control deck with Oranguru and Palpad there. And then just the other cards here, Shrine of Punishment is useful to continuously add damage to your opponent's GX. And once you have one Shrine of Punishment in play, you can then discard Shrine of Punishment, not a problem, with something like Ultra Ball. So this deck is more of a deck where you want to knock out the defending Pokemon, but you need to get the cards in your hand so that you can pare it down to 0 cards each and every turn. And if you don't have 0 cards in your hand, All Out can only do 30 damage, which is a big problem. I've actually tried to play with this deck a little bit on the online TCG, and it is definitely a difficult deck to play. But I think the popularity of 1 prize attackers, meaning that if Granbull's knocked out, only 1 prize card is taken instead of 2. Those types of decks will see lots of run in the future. Next up, I'll take a look at the 7th place deck, the Blacephalon GX Naganadel deck. I am skipping over a few decks up here, mainly Zoroark GX Decidueye, and then Alolan Ninetales GX. The strategy with those decks is to get Decidueye set up on your bench so that you can Feather Arrow and spread damage around to your opponent's Pokemon. Alolan Ninetales GX, the Fairy type one, just allows you to go and get 2 item cards, usually rare candy, when you evolve Alolan Vulpix into Alolan Ninetales. So the 7th place deck here, Blacephalon GX, was the deck that I wanted to use most from Lost Thunder. As you can see, pretty straightforward, very similar to the deck that I wanted to build. Only 1 player used this exact deck checklist. For Blacephalon GX, for Naganadel, they do throw in a Marshadow for Let Loose. So I'll head on over to the online TCG and show the general strategy. Now, compared to the previous 2 decks that I profiled, this deck is relatively simple to play. General strategy is to get 4 Naganadel set up, or as many as possible. That way you can use this ability charging up to move a basic energy, in this case a fire type energy, from your discard pile into play and put it on Naganadel. Turning Point is a decent attack, especially if you have 3 prize cards remaining. The primary attacker in the deck is Blacephalon GX. Mind Blown does 50 damage times the number of fire energy you move from your Pokemon to the Lost Zone. So you can accelerate fire energy into play with Naganadel and then do major damage every single turn with Mind Blown. So this is my type of deck, a deck that does major damage every single turn. As far as the other cards go, there is 1 Marshadow, so you can use Let Loose if you do not have a good hand, or maybe your opponent has used something like Magical Ribbon on Sylveon GX. And then the trainer cards. Heat Factory is very interesting. It allows you to get more cards into your hand. B-String is essential in the deck, especially later in games. It can accelerate more energy into play, guaranteeing a knockout. And then Beast Energy will increase the amount of damage that Blacephalon GX can do. And something a little bit different about this deck is that it uses Choice Helmet instead of Choice Band. Because Blacephalon GX can do so much damage, Choice Band is not useful. Choice Helmet, on the other hand, makes it so that Blacephalon GX essentially has 210 HP, making it that much harder to knock out. And then one very useful stadium card here would be Ultra Space. This allows you to get whatever Pokemon you want, whether it be Blacephalon, Poipole, or Naganadel, into play and accelerate those energy, because usually I use Ultra Space to go and get Naganadel. So there's a look at the Blacephalon GX deck. It will be interesting seeing the results from the Virginia Regional Championships. Usually the international tournaments have a different style of play. I would say it's almost more conservative, and in this case, it is more of a defensive type strategy and almost a stall type of strategy. In the United States, a lot of times, you see more powerfully attacking type decks. The last deck that I'll be reviewing in this video would be the deck that finished in 9th place. It is a Rayquaza Vikavolt deck. The reason I want to look at this one is because I didn't know how popular Rayquaza would be, since it is weak to Granbull decks. And going into Lost Thunder, it was my favorite deck in the standard format. So we'll take a look at the deck checklist here. Very similar to the deck that I used, except for they use Dhelmise instead of Shining Lugia, and they did use Zoroark GX, giving Pokemon with lightning energy attached to them a free retreat cost. I actually faced this deck with Zoroark GX in the League Challenge I attended recently. Did place first overall with my Lost Marsh deck. So 9th place here. I'll head on over to the online TCG and go through the general strategy. Here is a look at the Rayquaza GX Vikavolt deck. General strategy with this deck is to use Rayquaza GX as the primary attacker. Dragon Break on the card can do major damage. It does 30 damage times the amount of basic grass and lightning energy attached to all of your Pokemon. And the way that you accelerate energy into play is with Stormy Winds, the ability on Rayquaza, as well as Vikavolt, allowing you to attach 2 energy cards with strong charge. Now this deck does include 2 Dhelmise, and this is to take down things weak to grass type Pokemon, like a Lycanroc GX, for example. Powerful Spin can knock out Lycanroc GX in one attack. 130 damage also takes down a lot of one prize Pokemon out there, like a Dhelmise. As far as the other cards go, no Choice Band in this deck, so Zoroark GX is only used for its GX attack to accelerate energy back into play, and for its ability allowing Pokemon that have lightning energy attached to them to have free retreat cost. Full Voltage is very good, especially in a deck like this that is dependent on having lots of energy in play. Lysander Labs is in the deck, so that's why Choice Band is not in it. Pokemon tool cards in play have no effect. And then this deck does use 3 copies of Volkner. And this is a great way to go and get an Ultra Ball or a Rare Candy, for example, to get Vikavolt set up. You want to have at least 1 Vikavolt set up, ideally turn 2, but the more that you have set up, the easier this deck is to battle with. So of the 4 decks that I've profiled in this video, I definitely prefer the Blacephalon GX and the Rayquaza GX decks. So to conclude this video, as you can see from the results of the Latin America International Championships, Zoroark GX is still very popular in the standard format, especially going forward with the Zoroark Control decks. Alola Ninetales GX, the Fairy type one from Lost Thunder, has given decks with Stage 2 Pokemon a lot better chance at getting set up very quickly. So I think you'll see lots more Zoroark GX, Decidueye GX decks out there. So going forward, I would think that the popularity of Zoroark Control decks will increase. Because of that, you may see more decks out there that require only one energy card to attack, like Granbull decks. That way, if your opponent does use something to discard an energy attached to your Pokemon, you can then just go ahead and attack next turn, just reattaching an additional energy. So it will be interesting to see what happens at this weekend's Virginia Regional Championships. I hope to do a video like this for that tournament as well, and if you have suggestions for me on things you'd like to see in a future video like this, please let me know. So thanks everyone for watching. Make sure before you go to check out all the links in the description of this video, including links to my blog, Facebook, and Twitter pages, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.